Jax's revenge domain. Dallas heat doesn't negotiate. It sits on your shoulders like a wet towel and reminds you that air conditioning bills are real. I'm Jason Hayes, 49 years old, senior systems engineer at TechCore Industries. Currently walking across the parking lot at 6:45 a.m. because my son's college tuition isn't going to pay itself. 12 years I've been with this company, long enough to know that innovative workplace culture usually means they expect you to work weekends. Our company builds enterprise software for oil and gas companies, which means we make good money when oil prices are up and everyone gets nervous when they're not. The office sits in one of those glass towers off the North Dallas Tollway, where everything looks expensive and half the people driving here make more in a month than I used to make in a year back in the Army. That morning, I spotted a guy in the parking lot trying to fix what looked like a busted cooling unit on one of those big server trailers. His uniform was soaked through, tools scattered around him like he'd been at it for a while. The way he moved reminded me of the old-timers back in my Army days. Focused, methodical, not giving up even when the job was kicking his ass. I walked over. "You eaten yet?" I asked, pulling out my coffee and breakfast sandwich. "Been there myself. Long morning already." He looked up, surprised. Middle-aged guy, grease on his hands, the kind of tired that comes from starting work before sunrise. Same look I probably had during those 8 years in the Army when we'd pull maintenance duty at 0500 hours. "Thanks," he said, accepting the coffee. "Appreciate it. Nothing fancy. Just one working guy helping another." I headed inside thinking that was the end of it. Wrong, as it turned out. The TechCore lobby always smelled like expensive floor polish and the kind of coffee that costs more per cup than most people make in an hour. Security guard nodded at me like he had for the past 12 years. Elevators hummed up to the 15th floor where our engineering department lived, squeezed between sales and marketing like the filling in a corporate sandwich. Brad Watson hit me with his cologne before I even saw him. Brad was my division director, the kind of manager who treated every day like he was running for office. Perfect tie, hair that never moved, smile that looked practiced in a mirror. He was 35, ambitious, and had a corner office he'd earned by knowing PowerPoint better than protocols. 10 minutes late, "Hayes," he announced loud enough for half the floor to hear. "Some of us have been here since 6:30. I hung up my jacket. Server room backup ran long last night. Had to finish the diagnostics before the morning batch job started. He frowned like I'd personally insulted him. Brad was the kind of manager who thought showing up early was the same as working hard, and talking about work was the same as actually doing it. Problem was, he'd never actually touched a server in his life. He knew buzzwords and quarterly reports, which would be fine, except he liked to pretend he understood the technical side. I sat down, powered up my workstation. The familiar hum of the cooling fans, the soft click of keyboards around me, the gentle whir of hard drives spinning up. My team was already deep into code reviews and system checks. Good people, most of them. Junior engineers who actually knew their stuff, unlike management. Sarah, fresh out of Texas A&M with a computer science degree. Mike, 5 years experience and sharp as hell with database optimization. Lisa, our network specialist who could trace a bottleneck faster than Brad could say synergy. My calendar showed a welcome meeting for the new CEO at 9 a.m. Brad had been talking about it all week like he was personally introducing the president. Corporate had been tight-lipped about who was taking over after the old CEO retired, just that he was coming from outside the industry and wanted to meet division heads personally. I straightened my shirt and headed to conference room B on the 18th floor. Glass walls, long mahogany table, chairs that probably cost more than my truck payment. View of downtown Dallas, stretching out toward the horizon, all steel and glass catching the morning sun. 12 people already seated when I walked in. Brad stood at the front with his presentation remote, looking like he was about to launch a rocket. He gave me one of those warning looks that said I better not breathe too loud during his performance. I took a seat near the back. Safe distance from the show, close enough to hear whatever corporate wisdom was coming. The usual suspects were there, other senior engineers, a couple of project managers. The finance guy who always looked like he was calculating how much each meeting was costing the company. "We're just waiting for one more person," Brad said, checking his watch like punctuality was a personal virtue. He'd been preparing this presentation for days, I knew, probably practiced it in his bathroom mirror. The door opened, confident footsteps on the polished floor. I looked up and nearly choked on my coffee. The guy from the parking lot walked in. Clean suit now, hair combed, but same face. Same hands that had been covered in grease an hour ago. Our new CEO had been fixing cooling units at 6:45 a.m. in a Dallas parking lot. Brad didn't recognize him. Why would he? Brad had probably never been in a parking lot before 8 a.m. in his life. He rushed forward with his hand out and his voice pitched higher than usual. "Mr. Anderson, welcome to TechCore Industries. We're honored to have you leading us into the next quarter. Cole Anderson." That was his name. He shook Brad's hand, glanced around the room with the kind of calm assessment you learn in jobs where details matter. His eyes stopped on me for just a second, long enough for me to know he remembered the coffee, remembered the guy who'd treated him like a person instead of a title. I stayed quiet while Brad launched into his presentation. Growth metrics, efficiency improvements, team synergy, scalable solutions, all the buzzwords that sound impressive until you actually have to deliver results. Charts and graphs that looked good until you realized half the numbers were estimates based on projections of possibilities. When Brad got to the operations overview, he gestured toward me with the confidence of a man who'd never actually done the work he was describing. "Jason handles our server architecture and database optimization. Very detail-oriented, though sometimes he gets bogged down in the technical side instead of seeing the big picture." I gave a polite nod. No point arguing with Brad in front of the new boss. We'd all learned that challenging him in meetings just put a target on your back. Better to let him dig his own holes. Brad wrapped up with his signature confident laugh, the one that sounded like it came from a corporate training video. "Under my leadership, this division has become a model of efficiency and innovation. We've streamlined processes, optimized workflows, and maintained consistent growth metrics quarter over quarter. Anyone who'd actually worked with us knew that was like claiming credit for the sunrise. Our efficiency came from good engineers working around bad management, not because of it." Cole Anderson set down his pen and nodded once. "Thank you, Brad. Impressive presentation." His voice was calm, level, the kind of tone you hear from people who've learned to listen before they speak. "Could you send me the underlying data behind these numbers? I'd like to review the technical details and vendor relationships." Brad hesitated for half a beat, the kind of pause that comes when someone asks for information you don't actually have. "Of course. I'll have Jason compile the comprehensive analysis. He knows all the granular specifics." I nodded, though Brad didn't bother looking at me. "Standard procedure. Assign the work, take the credit, make sure someone else's name is on the documentation if anything goes wrong." Anderson looked directly at me. "Good. I'll expect that within 48 hours. The meeting broke up. People filed out, tossing around empty compliments about synergy and paradigm shifts. Brad strutted past me, tapping his folder like he'd just won the Super Bowl. "See?" he said as he passed. "Leadership is about presence and vision, not getting lost in the technical weeds." I smiled and let it slide. After 12 years working for him, I'd learned to pick my battles. By 2 p.m., the first email from the executive office hit our system. Subject line: Comprehensive Division Review. Data request. Request for detailed review of all vendor contracts, payment authorizations, and service agreements for the past 8 months. Copy to all senior staff, including me and Brad. I stared at the screen, feeling that familiar tension that comes right before you find something you weren't looking for. In the Army, we called it pre-contact anxiety. That moment when you knew you were about to step into something that would change everything. Brad appeared in my cubicle entrance 20 minutes later, wearing his practiced smile but with something different in his eyes. Something that might have been worry if you knew what to look for. "Jason, need you to help with some data requests from Anderson. Let's make sure everything looks professional and comprehensive." I looked at him. Professional meaning accurate or professional meaning something else? His smile tightened around the edges. "Just thorough. We want to make the best possible impression during his transition period. And if the data shows problems, there won't be any problems. We run a tight ship here." That night I stayed late. The office was quiet except for the hum of servers and the occasional security guard making rounds. Most of the engineering team had gone home to families, to lives outside these glass walls. I sat in the blue glow of my monitor, pulling up our vendor payment system. What I found made my coffee go cold. Precision Consulting Solutions, a vendor that had received $147,000 over 6 months for systems optimization and performance enhancement services. Problem was, I'd never heard of them. No contracts in our project management system, No deliverables in our file repository, no contact information beyond a P.O. box in Richardson, Texas. Every approval had Brad Watson's electronic signature. I dug deeper, cross-referencing with our actual project timelines. Data flow analytics. Another $89,000 for network efficiency consulting and infrastructure assessment. Same pattern, electronic approvals from Brad, no actual work that anyone on my team had ever seen or requested. Innovation Systems Group. $164,000 for strategic technology assessment and implementation planning. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. $147,000 plus $89,000 plus $164,000 equals $400,000 in payments to companies that apparently did nothing. All approved by Brad Watson, Division Director. I'd been building servers and debugging networks for 12 years. Before that, 8 years in the Army, learning that details matter when people's lives depend on you getting it right. I knew what vendor relationships looked like, what legitimate consulting contracts contained, what actual deliverables were supposed to document. This wasn't a mistake or an oversight. This was theft. I started printing everything. Bank transfer records, approval logs, email chains, system access logs. The laser printer hummed in the quiet office, spitting out page after page of evidence. I spread it across the small conference table we used for code reviews, under the LED lights that made everything look harsh and clinical. Every fraudulent signature looked exactly like what it was, a pattern of deliberate deception. Then I started backing everything up. External drive encrypted with military-grade protocols I'd learned years ago, cloud storage account under a separate email, even printed copies that I locked in my desk drawer. 12 years working for Brad had taught me that when trouble comes, he doesn't take responsibility. He finds someone else to blame. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Brad would approve payments to shell companies, probably ones he controlled. The money would disappear into accounts he had access to. Simple, effective, and completely illegal. I cross-referenced the payment dates with our actual project schedules. None of the consulting services coincided with real work. None of the deliverables existed in our documentation systems. None of my engineers had ever interacted with these companies. It was elegant in its simplicity and obvious once you had the data laid out properly. I thought about my son starting college in 6 months, about the mortgage on our house in Plano, about the 12 years I'd spent building a reputation as someone who did good work and kept his mouth shut. Then I thought about the junior engineers on my team, good people who trusted that the company they worked for wasn't built on lies. About the clients who paid us to solve real problems with honest solutions. I saved everything to the encrypted drive and shut down my computer. The decision was already made, really. Had been made the moment I saw those numbers. The next morning started with Brad walking into my cubicle without knocking. No greeting, just closed the partition door behind him like he was entering a confessional. His tie was crooked. His eyes had that sleepless look you get when your brain won't shut off at 3 a.m., but his voice tried to sound casual. "Jason, we need to talk about those vendor records. I know you found some discrepancies." I looked up from my monitor where I was pretending to review normal system logs. Discrepancies. Look, I realize this might seem complicated from a technical perspective, but there are aspects of executive operations that field engineers don't always have visibility into. I leaned back in my chair, the same chair I'd been sitting in for 12 years, watching Brad climb the corporate ladder, one PowerPoint presentation at a time. Help me understand. What services did Precision Consulting provide for $147,000? His eyes flicked to the right, the classic tell of someone preparing to lie. Strategic consulting, high-level organizational efficiency analysis, network efficiency consulting from data flow analytics. What exactly did they deliver for $89,000? Comprehensive assessment reports, infrastructure optimization recommendations. You wouldn't have seen them at your operational level. I nodded slowly. And Innovation Systems Group? $164,000 for what services? Technology road mapping, strategic planning initiatives, executive-level consulting that doesn't filter down to implementation teams. I stared at him for a long moment. In the Army, we had procedures for dealing with people who endangered the mission through negligence or corruption. Corporate America had different rules, but the principle was the same. Brad, I've been doing this for 12 years. I know every vendor we work with, every consultant who touches our systems, every contractor who's ever logged into our network. These companies don't exist. His face went red, the kind of flush that starts at the collar and works its way up. That's not your call to make, Hayes. You're overstepping your authority here. Am I? He stepped closer, lowering his voice like we were conspirators instead of what we actually were. An honest engineer and a corrupt manager having a conversation that would end badly for one of us. Listen carefully. We've worked together for a long time. I've protected you, kept you on the team when others thought you were too old school, too resistant to change. But if you push this corporate audit thing, it won't just be me that gets scrutinized. They'll investigate everyone who touched these transactions. Every approval, every signature, every person who might have known something. He paused, letting that sink in. Your boy's starting college next year, right? University of Texas. Expensive. Engineering degree doesn't come cheap these days. You really want to risk your job, your benefits, your pension over some paperwork discrepancies that you might be misinterpreting? I stood up slowly. Not aggressive, just to my full height so we were eye to eye. The only risk to my job is working for someone who thinks I'm stupid enough to cover for him. Brad's face went white. The color drained out like someone had pulled a plug. You're making a mistake, Jason. A big one. Corporate investigations destroy careers, even innocent careers, even people who are just following orders. After he left, I sat for a long time looking at my reflection in the black computer screen. The face looking back had gray in the temples and lines around the eyes that came from 20 years of squinting at technical diagrams and system logs, but it was still the face of, but it was someone who'd learned in the Army that you don't abandon your position when the enemy starts shooting. I opened a new email to Cole Anderson. Subject line, vendor analysis, comprehensive review complete. I attached everything. Every fake contract, every fraudulent payment, every electronic signature that led back to Brad Watson. Bank records showing where the money went. System logs showing when the false approvals were entered. Email trails showing Brad's attempts to cover his tracks. Then I typed, detailed financial analysis attached per your request. Multiple irregularities identified in vendor relationships and payment authorizations. Recommend immediate executive review and potential audit escalation. My finger hovered over the send button for about 30 seconds. Long enough to think about my mortgage payment, my son's college fund, the comfortable life I'd built over 12 years of keeping my head down and doing good work. Then I thought about the junior engineers on my team, who trusted me to protect them from corporate bullshit. About the clients who paid us to build honest solutions to real problems. About the difference between following orders and doing what's right. Click, send. The rest of that day felt like walking around with a ticking bomb in my pocket. Brad avoided my area of the office, which was smart of him. I caught him through the glass walls of his office, on his phone more than usual, typing emails with the kind of intensity that comes from trying to control a situation that's already gotten away from you. Around 4 p.m., my computer chimed with a calendar invitation. Executive review meeting, tomorrow, 9 a.m., conference room B. Mandatory attendance, all senior staff. I forwarded the invitation to my personal email and backed up everything one more time. If this was going to be the showdown, I wanted to make sure the evidence survived whatever came next. That evening, I drove home to Plano through the usual Dallas traffic, thinking about phone calls I might need to make. My ex-wife, to let her know there might be some job instability coming. My son, to explain that his college fund was secure regardless of what happened at work. My brother in Houston, who'd been through his own corporate whistleblower situation 10 years ago. But first, I had to see this through. The house was quiet when I got home. Just me and the dog, a 12-year-old lab mix who didn't care about vendor fraud or executive corruption as long as his dinner appeared on schedule. I sat on the back patio with a beer, watching the Texas sky fade from blue to orange to purple, and thought about the meeting tomorrow. In 18 hours, Brad Watson was going to face the consequences of stealing $400,000 from the company we both worked for. And I was going to be the guy who put the evidence in front of everyone who mattered. Sometimes the right thing and the smart thing aren't the same thing. But sometimes, if you're lucky, they turn out to be exactly the same thing. The next morning started with an all-hands email at 7:30 a.m. mandatory division meeting, 9 a.m. conference room B, all senior staff and project leads required to attend, no exceptions. I printed one more copy of the evidence and locked it in my truck's glove compartment. Military habit. Always have a backup plan when you're walking into hostile territory. Conference room B was packed when I arrived at 8:55 a.m. Every senior engineer, all the project managers, finance staff, even a couple of people from HR I didn't recognize. The energy in the room felt like the air before a thunderstorm, charged, tense, waiting for something to break. Brad stood at the front with his presentation remote, but something was different. His usual confidence looked forced, his smile strained around the edges. His tie was straight, his hair perfectly arranged, but there was sweat at his temples despite the aggressive air conditioning. Cole Anderson sat at the head of the conference table, quiet, watching. He had a laptop open and a stack of printed documents that looked familiar. My stomach did a small flip when I recognized my own formatting. "Good morning, everyone," Brad began, his voice pitched a little higher than usual. "I want to address some recent concerns about our vendor relationships and financial processes that have come to my attention." He clicked to his first slide. "Sometimes, in our eagerness to identify problems, we can misinterpret normal business operations and standard executive procedures." I sat in the back, watching faces around the room. My team members looked confused. The finance people looked nervous. HR looked like they were taking notes for a legal proceeding. Executive-level consulting relationships often involve confidential strategic initiatives that don't require operational team visibility, Brad continued. "This is standard practice across the industry." Anderson raised his hand. "Actually, Brad, let me share what I found in the documentation." He pressed a key on his laptop. The main screen lit up with our vendor payment records, every fraudulent transaction, every fake approval, every dollar that had disappeared into Brad's shell companies. The room went dead silent. "Precision Consulting Solutions," Anderson said, his voice calm and clear. "No registered business address beyond a PO box. No employees listed in state databases. No delivered services documented in our project management systems. $147,000 in payments, all approved by Division Director Brad Watson." Brad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The color drained from his face like someone had opened a valve. Anderson clicked to the next screen. Data Flow Analytics, Innovation Systems Group, same pattern, same electronic signatures. Total fraudulent payments, $400,000 over 8 months. A low murmur rippled across the room. Someone in the finance section whispered Jesus Christ under their breath. One of the HR people started typing rapidly on her laptop. "There's been some kind of system error," Brad stammered. "Database corruption, maybe. Accounting software malfunction." Anderson smiled, not mockingly, but with the patience of someone who'd heard every excuse in the book. "Accounting systems don't create fake companies, Brad. They don't generate fraudulent electronic signatures. They don't transfer money to P.O. boxes in Richardson, Texas." He turned to face the room. "For those who don't know, I spent yesterday morning and most of last night reviewing 8 months of detailed financial records, cross-referenced with project documentation and vendor verification databases. The fraud is extensive, deliberate, and thoroughly documented." The silence stretched like a cable about to snap. I could hear the air conditioning cycling, someone's pen clicking nervously, the distant hum of traffic 18 floors below. Anderson looked directly at Brad. "Would you like to explain how you approved nearly $500,000 in payments to companies that don't exist?" Brad looked around the room like a trapped animal searching for an exit. His eyes met mine for a second, and I saw something that might have been recognition. The look of a man finally understanding that the person he'd underestimated had just ended his career. I was following established procedures," Brad managed. "Executive discretionary spending protocols, strategic initiative funding. Which procedures authorize payments without contracts, without deliverables, without any verification of services rendered?" Anderson clicked to another screen showing bank routing numbers and deposit records. The money was transferred to accounts controlled by shell corporations registered to your home address in Highland Park. That did it. The room erupted in whispers, chairs scraping, people leaning forward to get a better look at the evidence. Brad's face went from white to gray to a shade of green I'd never seen on a human being. Anderson stood up. "Brad, Watson, you are suspended from all duties effective immediately, pending internal investigation and law enforcement review." 2 security officers appeared at the door. Not building security. These guys wore suits and had the kind of presence that comes from federal training. Brad wasn't handcuffed, but the message was crystal clear. As they escorted him out, Brad looked back one more time. Not with anger or resentment, but with something that might have been respect. Maybe he finally understood that keeping your head down and doing good work doesn't mean you're weak. Maybe he realized that the guy who'd shared coffee with the CEO had been playing a longer game than anyone suspected. After the door closed behind them, Anderson turned back to the room. This company will not tolerate fraud, theft, or abuse of trust. We punish deception, not honest mistakes. And today, TechCore has proven it no longer tolerates corruption at any level. People started coming over afterward. Sarah from my team grabbed my arm. "You really did it. You took him down." Mike shook his hand. "Thanks for not staying quiet. We all knew something was wrong, but what?" I asked. "But you were the one with the balls to prove it." That afternoon, I got an email with a new job title: Senior Engineering Director, Division Operations. Same work, better pay, actual authority to protect my team from the next Brad Watson who comes along. I drove home through Dallas traffic thinking about my son's acceptance letter to UT Austin, about the mortgage that would be easier to handle now, about the fact that sometimes doing the right thing actually works out exactly the way it should. The parking lot where I'd met Cole Anderson 3 days ago looked the same. Hot asphalt, server trailers humming in the heat, working people solving real problems with honest effort. My phone buzzed with a text from my son. "Dad, scholarship came through. Full ride plus the money you saved. We did it." Yeah, I thought, we did. Sometimes the biggest victories start with the smallest gestures: sharing coffee with a stranger, asking the right questions, refusing to look the other way when something's wrong. Sometimes keeping your integrity costs you everything. And sometimes, if you're patient and careful and you document everything, integrity pays dividends you never expected. If you've ever had your own Brad Watson, someone who mistook your patience for weakness, your competence for servitude, you understand this feeling. It's not about revenge. It's about standing up when it matters, protecting the people who count on you, and proving that doing good work the right way still means something in this world. And in Dallas, where the heat doesn't negotiate, that's enough. In the end, the guys who fix things in parking lots at 6 a.m. understand more about real leadership than the ones who show up at 8 with perfect ties and empty presentations. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to a corrupt system is exactly what they least expect: your job done right, with all the evidence properly documented.